Until a colleague of mine at the University of Saskatchewan, John Farthing, did some studies where he was thinking, yeah, okay, well, I'm paraphrasing what he was thinking, but I'm sure he was thinking something like, there's got these ideas of this strength intervention, doesn't have that much application to strength training, but what if you had an arm in a cast and you couldn't train it? What if you did some training with the other arm? Again, not obvious that you should do that, right? You'd say, well, how do I train this arm? Well, it's in a cast, you can't move it. And they did some studies where they casted the arm, trained on the other arm, and they found that the normal muscle wasting and strength loss that you get when you're casted was offset by the training with the other arm. So we had this idea around about the same time that we've just been doing now, which was, what about after stroke, where the two sides aren't even? We're not starting off from the situation where we've got each side able to do something. We can train both sides and get this great strength benefit. You can have people, and some of you may know, who are unable to activate muscles on one side of their body. They can't pick their toes up at all. If you can't activate the muscle, it's very difficult to get a training effect in that muscle. You can't train it. You can't provide the stimulus to improve the function. So the idea I had was, what if we did some training on the other side of the body, if we could still activate the opposite side that we didn't train in stroke? So in other words, if I'm the person who's had the stroke, and I've had the stroke in my left hemisphere, the left side is going to be my less affected side of my body, and the right side is going to be the more affected. This is going to be the one where the deficit is really showing up the most. What if I train this side in a situation where I can't activate what's going on over here? First of all, can we access whatever circuits are involved, and we know a little bit about them in the brain and the spinal cord that give you that change? Can we access it, and what can we use to access it? We did very simple strength training interventions, just trying to pull up your toes very rigorously against a resistance. And we found the fantastic outcome that you can train the other side of your body even after stroke. And we had some people that we trained in this study that we're just now submitting for publication who were unable to pick their toes up at all before the training and now could after training for 5 weeks with this other intervention, which was really, really cool. That's scientific lingo for things that are, it stands for things that are really cool. And what's really amazing about this is it may help give us a window to provide access to strengthening the body in a way that we couldn't before, and that we can now get to the main point. It gives us a boost where hopefully the person can now strength train the more affected side of the body because they can actually activate those muscles. And we're continuing on some of these interventions to look at what goes on in the arms as well. In other words, can you apply this as well to strength training in the arms? And we've been really building up now the case to use this idea that when you've got damage after a stroke, you have more affected parts of the body. But one way rehabilitative interventions might be additionally applied is to target other parts of the body. And one last thing I want to tell you about that. In other words, if you're trying to affect the legs, use the arms. If you're trying to affect this muscle in this leg, try this same muscle on this side of your body. One of the other things we discovered too in these studies is that we weren't doing it for the same purpose that Craig was talking about providing stimulation to the forelimb to help change some plastic changes in the brain of the mouse. But we found that when you gave electrical stimulation, so you activated skin, sensations, and different parts of the body, so in the hands and the feet, that some of the strongest effects you see in the leg muscles when people go to walk around after a stroke don't come from the leg that's had the biggest effect after stroke, and they don't come from the other leg, they actually come from the other hand. And this implies that there is this network of connections that maybe if we're allowing ourselves to think outside the box, to think about using arms to help legs, to think about using sensation from the skin to help activate muscles, to think about training one side of the body to activate another side of the body, that we're hoping we can harness and use for actual application and rehabilitation. And that's where our work is projecting towards now. And I remain very energized because of the little downer story I started off with about some things in my own family, to really pursue and take some of these things through to fruition and try and apply them and set up some basic principles that I'm hoping other colleagues and other clinical colleagues can then take up and use to good effect in rehabilitation. And the work that I just described to you, by the way, would not have happened without the Heart and Stroke Foundation. They provided the funding to help us get that work done and to keep doing that work. Other agencies as well have contributed to that. But the mainstay of the work that goes on in my lab that relates to our stroke interventions and our stroke studies all comes from the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And so if you donate to the Heart and Stroke Foundation, I thank you for doing so because it helps us do our work. When I do these talks, I always have the kind of kumbaya, circle of life thing. I have little kids, so, you know, the Lion King, there's like the lion, and everybody's in the, you know, everybody contributing to the progress that we're all trying to make. So that's really the story I want to tell you about my lab and some of the really exciting things that we're doing. And I also wanted to do kind of a what is the right word? Not an anti-segue, because that just doesn't make sense. To come back to where Chris was with his speech at the beginning, to return to that, and to bring us back to finishing off this evening's sort of presentation side of things, and getting to the point where we'd be happy to entertain some questions from you. I have one last thing I would like to do, though, before I do that, and that is to point at the screen that's not there. So I'll start over here, because it's the same thing anyways. And to acknowledge the fact that events like the ones we have tonight do have financial cost, and we've been very fortunate to have various partners contribute to putting on these events. So, for example, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, BC and Yukon also contributed to tonight's event to help fund this so we could put this evening together for you. The Island Medical Program, the Division of Medical Sciences here at the University of Victoria also contributed towards this, and we also have funding internally at UVic from the Office of the Vice President of Research that have contributed towards providing our ability to give you hopefully what has been an enjoyable evening so far. And having said that, I think we're at the point where we'd really like to have a bit of an exchange, and we have some microphones set up, and we have some people that are going to help move those microphones around to you. And I'd like to thank you for your attention so far, and ask you to, well, I want to, it's like with your kids, you know, you've done a great job so far. Thank you very much. And we look forward to discussing further with you. So